Richard, you made a comment a little bit before, and I want to cycle back to that. When we talked, you were talking about migrating root and branch, which I think we've used the term lift and shift as well to talk about replicating a footprint in the cloud. And your comment was, I'm not even sure if that would work. So and you've got a different perspective as well, because with your experience in some of the existing tools like Sybase IQ, which is designed to optimize for a lot of the same points that cloud-based data warehouses are designed to optimize for in terms of data latency, et cetera. So what is the difference between replicating an on-premises data warehouse in the cloud as opposed to modernizing to a cloud-based data warehouse solution?
Okay, well, the biggest difference is always assuming that it's possible, always assuming that you can have the diversity of systems and diversity of connections that you have on-premise. I mean, we potentially might be talking about 30, 40, 50, 60 computers, different computers running different parts of the application. Yes, of course, you can have these all hosted on the cloud. Yes, some of the interconnects between these systems are going to be a lot faster. But all you're doing is duplicating your existing system. You're achieving nothing except possibly a cost benefit. There may be a cost benefit, and sometimes that's a little bit difficult to achieve. Now, you have resilience issues. You're running on a cloud server, and the cloud server goes down. These things do happen. Our dear friends at Amazon had this issue earlier on this year, late on last year. Your protection of your system and your data is different when you're running in the cloud as to when you're running on-premise. If you're running on-premise, you can iron wall the systems. You can protect absolutely everything. You don't have that degree of super protection inside the cloud that you might have on an on-premise solution. That's just one of the many areas that you've got to address if you are going to do a root and branch or lift and shift. And one of the advantages of doing a big move, and it is a big move to move from on-premise to cloud, one of the advantages you can achieve is to be able to modernize existing systems. As Mark said, you've got a highly complex application. That highly complex application may be because of changes to regulatory authorities, changes to data sovereignty rules, changes to whatever. That highly complex application may not, it may not be necessary anymore and is only used in a very minor part of your overall system. Or it may be used in such a way that it could be engineered and designed simpler. Use the opportunity of moving into the cloud as an opportunity to redesign and re-engineer parts of your application. Undoubtedly, I would suggest, we did a poll some 10 years ago, so that's in history really, but 10 years ago we did a poll with three large financial institutions in the City of London. And the general consensus was that 48% of the code that was running on the servers was never used. And another 20% was only used once or at most 3 times a year. By analyzing your current use of your systems and analyzing how well the systems can change, the flexibility and agility, sorry, mentioned them again, by analyzing those, you can simplify your overall systems very, very easily. Use the cloud migration as a means of simplifying your overall system application, your overall system architecture.
Mark, some thoughts about the differences between root and branch versus modernizing, and just to kind of summarize, Richard, one of the things that sounded like you were saying is that the modernization approach in which you're reconsidering or rethinking how your system is supporting business needs would allow you to refactor the application and target it towards the cloud architecture. So, Marks, anything to add to that?
I mean, like, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a byproduct of moving to the cloud, and a lot of folks take that opportunity to re-architect their entire data management and analytics kind of strategy as well, and take a fresh approach to how they implement these things. So I see that happening a lot. And, you know, I'd actually respectfully disagree with something Richard said earlier on the call around high availability in the cloud versus an on-prem data center. And I've heard many and seen many horror stories of lack of availability in a single company's data center and breaches there. And I think in some ways the cloud gives you an opportunity to hedge your bets and put in place high availability and disaster recovery schemes, not just spanning different regions in one cloud provider, but across multi-cloud as well. I mean, there are ways, or even hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. So I think there are ways that you can kind of address that problem.
Thanks. So one of the things that sounded like you were saying is that, you know, it is a difficult thing to do to really re-architect. That is a little bit of a high hurdle to jump. And those organizations that have done so, I would assume that they have also experienced other types of hurdles as well. So, you know, what are some of the hurdles that your customers have faced once they've decided to do this migration to the cloud?
So some of the main hurdles is that it quickly becomes apparent to anyone who's sort of feet on the ground doing these kinds of things that you simply don't pick up a data warehouse, you know, copy the data over to something in the cloud, and off we go to the races. It's the data movement between something on-prem and even a new data warehousing platform in the cloud is pretty trivial, to be honest. That's not where the problem lies. It's about all of the interconnecting tissue around that data warehouse that exists on-prem. So it's all the upstream data pipelines and ETL work that goes on, and all the downstream applications that need to be kind of re-evaluated, perhaps skinnied down, re-implemented, and a lengthy kind of Q&A process to make sure that you're still getting the right financial results if you're relying on that system to do your kind of end of quarter book management and closing, for example. So I would say the biggest challenge that some of our customers that have gone on that journey with us from on-prem to the cloud has been around moving and modifying a lot of that ETL tasks. And we have customers in this industry with 5,000 plus ETL tasks or more. And in fact, the biggest challenge there was not as much around re-implementing the ETL, was really around making sure that they were getting the right numbers, the right results, that kind of Q&A process at the end.
So let me poke at that a little bit. It sounds like, or maybe I'm inferring from some of the things that you guys are saying, is that when you do look at the way these systems are architected and on-prem and the historical, and Richard, you kind of referred to I think it was Richard, that significant amount of code was never run or only runs once or twice a year. So here you've got a lot of code that might be just existing. I'm not going to use the word trash, but it's kind of hovering around stuff that doesn't necessarily add any value. And Mark, you were just referring to pipelines, upstream pipelines, downstream pipelines, data integration. How do you spend? What's the right way to rethink even the needs for data integration? Because one of the things that I've been hearing from a bunch of folks who have migrated to the cloud is that you don't really need to do the integration anymore, because your data is available to you in real time, or so they say. So thoughts about that, Richard? I'll poke at you first on that one, and then we'll come back to Mark.
Oh, thank you very much, David. Yes, it's technology changes, and I think that's the biggest thing that when you look at a legacy system versus a system that was designed today or yesterday. Technology changes. There are so many things you can do now that you could not do 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And some of these legacy systems are 20 and 30 years old. They rely on, I mean, it's quite a modern system that relies on a real ETL tool. A lot of the ETL tools still used in the big banks today are C-level programs. God's sake, I hope there are no COBOL programs left, and I'm probably the only person on this call who knows what a COBOL program is. But anyway, moving on.
There's actually a huge amount of COBOL code still out there.
Dear.
So I'd be surprised if there weren't a lot.
No, that is very true. But it's taking the opportunity again to be able to do this, and some of the things like the reconciliation in data warehouses. I have built systems in the past that have had to pre-calculate everything because the data warehouse, the database that controlled the data warehouse, just wasn't fast enough to be able to do the reconciliation. Nowadays, you don't need to do that. You're almost, not quite, and this is a very arrogant way of putting it, you're almost just throwing the data into a big bucket and your query becomes your reconciliation process. The queries run that fast, the databases run that fast that you don't have to have complex data massaging of input data. You can just run with it. Again, this is an advantage you can take with you when you move to the cloud because you'll be using, hopefully, modern hardware and modern software.
Mark, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned that, you know, in kind of more modern cloud architectures, folks might not be using ETL in the same way they have done in the past, and I think that is true to some degree. And if you look at kind of a modern architecture for data management and analytics in the public cloud, it's usually some combination of a data lake and data warehouse kind of play in place. And you know, you've got raw data hitting your object storage in cloud, and then you might be using some sort of Spark-based task to do some data preparation and data processing. You might be moving more to kind of an ELT approach and getting the data warehouses to do a lot of this kind of data processing and integration itself directly. And then, you know, quite often you're publishing data artifacts and data products back out to the lake or something to be consumed by other applications. So definitely the kind of more of a modern kind of data management and architecture plan has come about around in the cloud. That's certainly the case.